You know, life doesn't have to be a big puzzle, a problem, a constant trail of difficulties. It can be something else entirely. It can be a game, if you like, entertainment. It can be a source of an endless stream of wisdom, if you like. Hi, I'm Charles Burke, and I help people get the best and the most out of the life they're already living. As I mentioned in another video, I lived about a year with my grandparents on a little farm in Georgia. I remember one day, my grandmother and we walked out into well, let me back up. There's a story here. It was lunchtime and it was hot. It was July or August. And it was just too hot to eat lunch in the kitchen. So my grandmother, being a high energy, bustling person that she was, she packed a picnic lunch and she said, "Come on, let's go have a picnic in the pasture up on the hill." So we went up the hill and it was just not right there. There wasn't quite enough shade. So we walked on past and down into a little hollow, and there was a small lake there. A quiet place. There were some trees nearby, so it was really cool and nice. And once we got there, my grandmother said, "Now go over to the little lake over there, take this pitcher and this dipper and take some water out of the lake, get us something to drink. We don't need a lot." So I walked over and I dipped out some water, brought it back. My grandmother looked at it and said, "Don't you think this water is just a tiny bit cloudy, son?" Well, yeah, when I started dipping, stuff just stirred up and got in the water. "Well, do you really think we ought to be drinking that?" "Well, no, ma'am. I'll do it again." So this time she went over with me and I started to dip and she said, wait, before you do that, your dipper's got a long handle on it, but you don't have to use the whole length of the dipper handle. Just because it's got a long handle, you don't have to reach all the way and scrape down in the bottom and get the mud and the dirt. Oh, yeah. So I started dipping out just the surface water, nice, clean, pristine. This was back in the days when it was safe to drink water that was streaming through, coming down off the hills or out of the springs. It was nice, clean, fresh water. And I was getting the best of the best. We went back over, we had our lunch, our picnic. And later I was thinking about that. Years later, I realized when you're dipping into your feelings, when you're dipping into your memories, you don't always have to use the full length of the dipper and dig down and bring up the worst of the stuff that has settled out of your life and bring it back up and stir it back in if you don't want to. You can just take the surface stuff that's nice and clean and keep a nice, placid life until you're ready to clean the bottom out and get everything clean all the way to the bottom. But you don't have to do that every day. Just don't use the full length of the dipper unless you have to. Another time, I was 13 or 14, I was in 8th grade. And you know how 8th graders are. That age, lots of energy, no common sense, or at least I didn't. There was another guy on the other side of the room, a kid named Sam, and he was just as mischievous as I was. And one day the teacher was writing, I don't know, I think it was spelling words on the blackboard. Well, green board. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him stand up, whip his arm, a spit wad whacked up the side of my head. Well, I couldn't let that go past. I retaliated. I pulled off a little piece of paper, chewed it up, squeezed it out. When he wasn't looking, I flung one back at him. Well, this went on for 3 or 4 exchanges. And then I guess I figured he had just gotten tired of the thing and had just quit the game. He had chewed up 2 or 3 pages, whole sheets of notebook paper. Next thing I know, out of the corner of my eye, I see him stand up, whip his arm, and I see this huge ass spitball coming at my head. Well, I dropped down out of my desk onto the floor, and the thing missed me. It hit a cabinet door on the side right beside me. And you know, these sliding cabinet doors, the old Masonite doors, they would, if you touched them, they'd kind of rattle. Well, this one went, blah, 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 blah. And the teacher whipped around from the blackboard and looked at us, him just sitting down, me just getting up out of the floor. And she saw that spit wad on the cabinet door. Now, back then, they called me by my middle name, Byron. She was beyond furious. She just stood there. You could hear her teeth grinding. Her fists were down at her side. Her shoulders were up at her ears. And she gritted out, "Byron, go home." She kicked me out of the class. She didn't just send me up to the principal's office. She was tired of that. She wanted some variety, right? She sent me home. And on the way home, this was a new experience for me. And I was a little upset with it, discouraged. And about half the distance home, about a 1.5 mile walk, I was crying. 14 years old, crying, right? Okay. But I was crying and I was telling myself, man, I am the worst kid in that class. I am just no good. There's no way I'll ever be any good. All over a stupid spit wad. Now, of course, it was a monster spit wad. It was a big old spit wad. But ruin your life, resign your whole life because of one? Well, it took me years and years and years to get past that monster spit wad, because every time I would begin to feel like, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I got this in me. I'd remember that wad of paper hanging on the cabinet door beside my head and the long walk home. And something inside me would just deflate. And I'd get this little lost feeling down in the pit of my stomach. And I held on to that for the longest time until finally, I realized that, no, man, that was just 2 kids playing and one teacher in her first year of teaching, a sweet, kind lady who was just in over her head with that particular rascally group of kids. There's no reason that had to ruin my life. And so from that day forward, it pretty much didn't. But we can take lessons from everything that happened to us. Everything that goes past our window, goes through our hands, goes into our eyes or our ears, everything that comes along, we can take a lesson from it. Now, we can take a useful lesson, or we can take a harmful lesson. I'm Charles Burke, and I help people get the right lessons out of the things that have happened to them and the things that are going to happen to them in the future.